We're now on lesson 18, where we are moving away from verbs, we are moving away from nouns, we're putting them together, and we're talking about participles, which are verbal adjectives. So they have both verb parts and they have adjective parts. And first time Greek students often struggle with participles, but we have participles in English. So hopefully, let's talk about what participles are in English a little bit, or how they correspond in Greek. And that might help us get introduced into participles in Greek. So participles are just ing words. So while eating my sandwich, I choked. Okay, eating there, I'm using a verb, adding an ing. Okay, so that's one use of a participle. I can also put an article in front of it, and I can say, the eating one is me. And there I just changed a participle, a verb, eating, into a noun, the eating one, or the one eating, the one believing, are some participles that are function as nouns. I can also say, the eating man was me. And there, eating is modifying man, and I'm using it in an adjective kind of way. So in English, we also use ing participles in similar ways that Greek does. And so that's all it is here with participles. So going to our playground here. Let's talk through this a little bit of how this works with verbal aspect. Because if you remember, outside of the indicative, you shouldn't think tense. You shouldn't think time. You should think aspect. And so participles are not indicative, and so you shouldn't be thinking tense. You should be thinking aspect. So playground here, if I say here, I ate the sandwich, that is, let me move all these out of the way. This would be the aorist, the simple past. And here I'd be referring to just a simple action of eating. I ate the sandwich, like that. Versus if I said, I was eating the sandwich, in that case, we would have, moving this out, we would put the imperfective aspect here. It'd be like this. Here's me. I'm thinking about a time in the past, and I'm referring to this time I was eating the sandwich. I'm not looking at the action as a whole. It's not completed. Maybe it's in process or something like that. So I'm viewing the action as it's going about. And I can say, I have eaten the sandwich, and that would be the perfect. We've called that the combinative. So a past action with ongoing effects, like this. So in the past, I ate the sandwich, and it has ongoing effects where I say I have eaten the sandwich. Often it'll be in a present effect. Okay, so those are the three tenses that we've learned in terms of like verbal aspect. So now, if I want to say eating the sandwich, okay, participle, and you can just feel that's not a complete sentence. Eating the sandwich, ... finish it for me, right? And that's the same in Greek. Participles can't stand on their own. You need a main verb to go with it. So, eating the sandwich, I choked. Okay. So, here, I choked is now the main verb. And that's a simple past, an aorist. And so it would be like this. I choked. But then, eating the sandwich, this is an ongoing action at the time of when I am choking. eating the sandwich, I choked. And so this is kind of what a participle does, is it gives you kind of background or supporting information that supports the main verb. So here, this is the background while eating the sandwich, and then I'm going to give you the main verb, what happened. That's kind of part of the story. Okay, so this ongoing background information type of use of the participle, this would be the present. This would be the present participle. Because if you remember our chart, present has imperfective aspect, and then aorist has perfective aspect. Participles, we don't have an imperfect participle. There are a few future participles. They're not as common in Greek. And we have a perfect participle. So we're going to focus on those, present, aorist, and perfect, the three different aspects of participles. So we just talked about present. Present is the imperfective aspect, and it gives you kind of what's going on background. Versus if I said something like having eaten the sandwich, here we have the ing, and if I say something like having eaten, I'm making that into a perfected state, right? I've completed eating the sandwich. Having eaten the sandwich, I might say something like, I got up, right? I finished eating, so I got up. So here, rather than being background information at the same time, like this action is already done. So it's something like this. Having eaten the sandwich supports then why I got up. Like that. And this is where it's really hard to translate the difference between a perfect and an aorist participle. And they're often very similar in meaning. But sometimes you'll see aorist participles translated like after eating the sandwich, right? Because it's trying to get here I've eaten it, and then after that I got up. So sometimes you'll see it like that. The perfect participle, we do combinative aspect like this, and you usually translate it as having eaten the sandwich. I got up. So it would just be more of a focus on the present, the present reality of having finished the sandwich. Because I'm in the state of being done, that's why I got up. Versus if you have the the aorist participle, you're more focused on the sequence of events. Did this, and then I did this. Okay, so this is the adverbial use of the participle. Adverbial, because I'm modifying my verb. I got up. I got up. But you can also have noun and adjective uses of the participle. And we already talked about this one. So if I said, the eating one is me. The eating one, that's the participle. The ing there. So you just add the article to a participle. In Greek, you wouldn't have one here. We have to add that in English in order for it to sound right. But in Greek, you don't need the one. Just like adjectives. Adjectives, like if I say ho pistos, the faithful one, I don't need to add anything on the end. Just putting the article before the adjective makes it into a noun. And then I can also make it into an adjective. The eating man. This would be like ho estheon anthropos. This eating is modifying man, and so this would be an adjectival use of the participle. And the aspect would all still apply. So if I'm here this is probably like a present. I'm the one who is eating, in the process of eating. Versus if I don't know. This is nouns get hard to translate in aspect. Um, but the one, if I said like the one who had who had eaten or something, um, the one who had eaten, that might be like a way you could translate an aorist noun, uh, aorist participle with an article into a noun. Okay, so I tried to do as much English work there. Now let's go and look at Croy and go through his text here. So he gives first the present active participle forms, and it looks like a lot. It looks like a lot, but if you look carefully, you will notice that the masculine here, you have ont. Ont is the participle morpheme here. And then the endings are just third declension endings that you learned last week. So you're actually not learning any new endings. You just have to learn how to combine them. So you're adding ont and then plus third declension. And just like third declension, the nominative masculine or the nominative singular is just going to be weird. You just have to be aware of that. In the feminine, you add us, and then you have normal first declension endings. If you look down, normal first declension endings. So again, no new endings, but masculine it's third declension endings, feminine it's first declension endings, and then neuter is also third declension endings, but they're the neuter third declension endings. So you'll see a lot of overlap between masculine and neuter, but you'll see some like the luonta versus luontes are going to be different because neuter versus masculine. So good news is no new endings. No new endings. You just have to reconfigure endings you already know and know how the participle uses them. So the present active participle you'll sometimes see uses the endings 3, 1, 3. Okay? That means third declension, first declension, third declension endings. And that's in opposition to the present middle passive participles. Here, use 2, 1, 2. Passive participles have men plus the second declension endings. So the same endings as like logos. And neuter has men as well and uses the second declension endings in the neuter. So the same endings as like ergon. Feminine still uses the first declension endings, and it also has men. In Daily Dose of Greek, Robert Plummer, he has this way of remembering participles, is that in church, men are often in the middle. We're in the middle of the pew, and they are passive because they're not paying attention or whatever. So, or they're not doing their part. That's what he says. Men in the middle of the pews being passive, not doing their part. I can help you remember that when you see this men participle morpheme in the middle, it's the middle passive participle indicator, and then you have to know your second and first and second endings to be able to parse it out and say what it is modifying. Okay, so 3, 1, 3, third declension, first declension, third declension in the present active participle, and then 2, 1, 2 in the middle passive participle. And so with middle passive, we talked about the active forms with the ing added to the verb. With middle passive, or with passive, you're going to add being loosened, right? Just like in the normal verbs, we added to be, like rather than I hit, I added to be I am hit, to make it into the passive. So the same thing is here, but we have to make it into a participle. So we have to add an ing. So here we put being loosened to make the passive participle. Okay, syntax, it talks about the different ones here. So adjectival, so ho pistellon aner, the believing man. So here, pistellon is modifying aner, and so it makes it an adjective. You can also make it stand on its own, like this. Hoi pistuontes, the believing ones. That's how you'd make that. It's a substantival. It's made into a noun. And then adverbial, we also looked at. So, kata bainon proston ten thalasan hoaner eferon thoyon. So we would do while he was going down into the boat, comma, or sorry, going down to the sea. I'm thinking the boat over here. The man was carrying a boat. So if we go to our chart here, how we would do that one. So he was carrying the boat. So that's an imperfect. So you do imperfect aspect. So here, this would be he was carrying the boat while going down to the sea. So we're using a present imperfective aspect participle. And so this is giving the underlying situation that the main verb is happening. So here, going down to the sea, he was carrying the boat. So that's the meaning there. Okay. Yes, tense and time are not in the participle. And then here's the AME forms of the participle. And you'll notice it's basically the participle endings, but just the endings. There's no kind of root that you can see anymore. And it follows the 3-1-3 like normal, but it's the same ending. So this is actually one of the easier forms of AME to memorize. So, and then that brings us to the end. So that's participles. We've done present, and next time we will look into aorist.